So, Vilfredo Pareto, he's the first guy to figure this out. I think he's one of the 100 most brilliant people of the last 100 years, and greatly underrated. People talk about Einstein. People talk about, the guys that discovered DNA, or the people who discovered, Thomas Edison. Pareto's just as important as any of those guys, because he recognized a fundamental law of cause and effect. Now, with Pareto, it was the wealth distribution of countries. He figured out that no matter what country he looked at, 20% of the people owned 80% of the wealth, and it didn't even matter what kind of government they have or what kind of wealth redistribution scheme that they had. It was still 80-20. Well, what people figured out eventually was that his discovery applied to lots of things. It's in science, it's in math, it's in physics, it's in engineering, and yes, it's in marketing and sales and business management and quality control, all kinds of fields. Now, what you see here is the academic version of, it's called a Pareto distribution. And I'm not going to try to explain it. I'm just going to tell you that you kind of have to understand calculus to understand what it's trying to tell you. I don't think it's very easy to use. It's kind of hard to understand. It's not very useful. And what I decided to do was I needed to change the way that it was presented. I needed a way to show it that's more intuitive to business people and a way that shows the fractal nature. So I reformulated it like this. And so, again, you've already seen these curves, but so what the old version does is it shows the concentration of value. This shows the quantity of value. So these are this is the wealth of the people in the Forbes 400. Okay, and so if I go to the top, if I follow this along, the theoretical amount of wealth owned by the Forbes 400 very closely matches the theory, and you can see that the vast majority of the wealth is in this area right over here, because it zooms up into the sky at incredible speed. So everything on Earth is incredibly unequal. Now, in school, most of the time, they try to teach us to make things equal. So we want you to get an A in history, and an A in math, and an A in science, and an A in reading, and an A in physical education. But that's not how your life is going to work. The way your life is actually going to work is you get an A in English or Italian or whatever your language is, and you don't do math at all. And if you got a C in math, it doesn't really matter that much. What matters is if you're gonna teach Italian, or if you're gonna teach English, then you better be really good at that, right? Because 20% of the classes you take are 80% of what you're actually going to need in your life. So this new way of presenting 80-20, I came up with this 15 years ago, and with some help from my friends at Performance Strategies, we just published this in Harvard Business Review. This is the first time I actually put the math out into a publication. And we have a website, 8020curve.com, where you can enter numbers and you can predict what's going to happen. So I'm going to show you some useful ways to do this. So, population of cities in Italy. Well, the black is the theory and the blue is the actual reality. Donations to a church on a particular Sunday morning, it's 80-20. The dairy output of Wisconsin counties. So there's all kinds of weird random things, and they all fit this pattern. So the way that you've been taught to think about numbers is very limiting in business. Everybody's teaching you the wrong way to think about numbers. So when you have customers, most people think of their customers as all being the same. The reality is that you have one giant customer who's just as important as the next two put together, who's just as important as the next four put together, who's just as important as the next 8, who's just as important as the next 16. Okay, so if you have 5 hours today and you need to help some customers, this is how you use your 5 hours. You spend 1 hour serving customer number 1, you spend 1 hour serving the next 2, and then another hour in the next 4. And the people over at the end, they only get a little bit of attention. They don't deserve a lot. Okay? If you want to maximize your income, maximize your sales, maximize the impact of your marketing, that's how you allocate your time. Y'all seen a curve like this? It's a bell curve. You take a test in school, and the average on the test was 77%, and then a few people got 100, and a few people got a 30. That's how everybody teaches you to think about numbers. It's the wrong way to think about numbers. Here's why. So if you had a science test and the average was 77%, here's the real question. The kids that got a 77 on their science test, are they going to be scientists? Not usually. Okay? Now, if we put the science capability of all those kids on an 80-20 curve, it looks like this. Okay? And if you look at this, the best 2 students in the class, practically speaking, are going to do more science in their life than the other 30 put together. I think it was Bill Gates or Steve Jobs said, one good computer programmer can get more accomplished than 100 mediocre computer programmers. Steve Jobs said, a really good taxi driver is at best 3 times as good as a bad one. But a really good computer programmer could be 1,000 times more productive. So in companies, in markets, in customers, there's these tiny concentrations of huge value. Okay, if I want to sell 50 shoes, which is easier, selling 1 pair of shoes to 50 of you, or selling 50 pairs of shoes to one lady who obviously loves shoes? This is one of the most important things you have to understand in marketing. It's called the hyper-responsive customer. In every crowd, there's a customer who buys everything. They'll buy the most expensive thing you have. They always want the biggest and the best. Or everybody's going to order 1 and they're going to order 100. Or everybody's going to order 10,000 and they're going to order 1,000,000. So what's average is the wrong question. Everybody talks about average. Average almost never matters. Average is not the lever that turns things. The right question is, who are the superstars? And how super are the superstars? So, 80/20 applies to time productivity, cash flows, vendors. So it could be which vendors you buy the most stuff from. It's also which vendors cause the most delays. You're manufacturing a product and it has 114 parts, and all the delays come from 2 vendors who can't get their act together. Everybody else is on time, but they're late, and you can't ship until you have all the parts. 80/20 applies to customers. And remember, it's not just 20% of the customers, it's 4% of the customers, it's 1% of the customers. 1% of your customers give you 50% of your money. Media channels. There's a lot of media channels. You can't deal with all of them. You can't be in Pinterest and Twitter and Skype and Snapchat and Google and Facebook and TV and radio. You can't do that. You have to figure out what's the 20% of the media channels that have 80% of the effectiveness, or the 1% of the media channels that have 50%. Employees. If you have 10 employees, 2 of them accomplish as much as the other 8 put together. Now, this is not what most people want to hear, but it's true. Defects, product defects. 20% of the defects cause 80% of the warranty returns. If you have a car, there's probably like 4 things that go wrong with that car. If they fixed those 4 things, the warranty returns or the recalls would go down less than half. What it means is you only have to fix a few problems. You don't have to fix everything. The enemy of 80/20 is perfectionism. Oh, I've got to polish this one thing. It's got to be so perfect. Well, there's usually 1 or 2 things in your business that have to be perfect, and everything else doesn't have to be perfect. You have to apply perfection to a very small strategic. Am I applying my perfectionism to the 1% that controls 50%? Or am I just wasting my time? Am I procrastinating?
Hi, this is Perry Marshall. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it with your friends.